Masechet Avoda Zara Daf Samech. Hahi Chavita de Chamra de Ishtekil le Barza. There was a barrel of wine, and the stopper or the spigot that was on the side fell out, and the wine was about to spill out. Atagoy idre anach yede ilave. A non-Jew came, jumped up, and he put his hand over the hole in order to save the wine from spilling out, which is really nice of him. The problem is now that his hand or his finger in the hole is touching the wine. What is the status of the wine? Amar Rav Papa, kol delahade barza chamra asir. Rav Papa says the wine that's adjacent to that spigot, to that hole, is prohibited, but only the wine right near it, the rest of the barrel, is permitted. So this would be different if he put his hand in to the top or bottom, then everything in the entire jug would be prohibited. We're talking about, for sure, prohibited to drink. Question is, would it be also prohibited to get benefit from? So Rishonim talk about that. But in one way or another, it's prohibited. If it's from the top or the bottom, in that way, he has access to all of it, everything. So if it's from the bottom, then all of the wine is resting on his finger. Let's say there's a hole on the bottom. And on the top also, it's all of the wine is holding up that wine that he is touching up on top. So therefore, when it goes vertically, then his hand on top or bottom will make everything prohibited. But on the side where that's not true, so then it only makes prohibited that little bit of wine around there, but the rest of it will be okay. This makes more sense if you say it's prohibited for drinking, but permitted to get benefit from. So then, well, that would mean you can't drink from the whole thing because it's going to get mixed around. But benefit, then you can sell the whole thing. Or if you say it's prohibited to get benefit from it, then it just means that you could sell it, but you'd have to deduct a certain amount from that area. So that's the first version of what Papa says. Ve'idach shareh, the rest of the barrel is permitted. Ve'ikad amri, amar Rav Papa, ad habarza chamra asir. Ve'idach shareh, there's another version of Rav Papa that's more stringent and says, if there's a hole on the side and the non-Jew puts his hand over there to stop it from coming out, then everything from that hole and above is prohibited, because if he had not done anything, then all of that wine would have come out from the hole and above. So his hand is effectively keeping in, holding up everything from there and above. However, from everything below that line, from below the hole, that would have stayed inside anyway. So his hand had no effect on that which is below. So this is going to be more stringent. Now, it could be half the container will be prohibited, but the rest is permitted. Amar Rav Yemar ketanae chavit shenikeba ben mipiha ben mishuleha ben misideh v'naga bo tivul yom temea. Rav Yemar says this opinion of Rav Yemar is subject to a debate between two Tanaim. In other words, not everybody would agree with it, because here Tanakama in this Mishnah in Masechet Tivul Yom says that if you have a barrel that was pierced, has a hole, had got a hole in it, and doesn't matter whether that hole is on the top or on the bottom or on the side, at Tivul Yom came, that's someone who was Tameh, and he went to the mikveh, but it's not nighttime yet. And so he still can give things tum'ah. So he comes and touches it. Teme'ah, the entire barrel is prohibited. So you see, according to Tanakama, that would be inconsistent with Rav Papa, because according to Tanakama, even on the side, everything becomes prohibited. Rabbi Yehuda omer mipiha misholeh teme'ah misideh teora mikan umikan. Rabbi Yehuda, however, disagrees and says, if he touched it from on top and the bottom or on the bottom, that's where the hole is, then in fact everything inside is tameh. But if he touched it on the side, then it doesn't matter if it's on this side or on that side, then the contents are tahor. So you see that Rav Papa is consistent with Rabbi Yehuda, that being on the side is more lenient than if it's on top or on bottom. It still may make tameh some of it, maybe some just a little bit around it or from there up, but the rest of the contents will be okay. Amar Rav Papa, Goy Adana v'Yisrael Akuba, Chamra Asir. My ta'ama ki ka'ateh mikoach goy ka'ateh. Now, the usual case we've been thinking about before, if a non-Jew pours wine, so he's pouring the wine into another cup. He's holding the barrel and he's holding the cup. So he's holding both of them. So therefore, for sure, it's prohibited if he's pouring wine out for someone. However, Rav Papa is now going to ask, what if the non-Jew is doing one of the actions of pouring out and the Jew is doing the other action? So we'll see both ways. So if a non-Jew is holding the barrel and pouring out the wine from the barrel, he's tipping it over, and a Jew is holding the beaker, the cup, to collect the wine, then that wine is prohibited. What's the reason? Because it's coming from the force of the non-Jew. He's the one that's moving it, pouring it, and making it come out. So therefore, that's prohibited. That's the main thing. That's what he might have in mind. Oh, I'm pouring this for some idol. Yisrael adana v'goy akuba chamara sharev imeseded sadudeh asir. But the other way around, if the Jew is holding the big barrel and tipping it out, pouring it out, and the non-Jew is just holding the cup, he's just holding it in place, then it's permitted because the non-Jew is just holding it to make sure it doesn't fall over, but he's not moving it around, he's not shaking it, he's not doing anything, therefore it's allowed. But if he does tilt it from side to side, swishing it around, then while he's doing that, he might have in mind he's swishing it around, moving it around for the idol, and then we prohibited. But if he keeps it in one place, that's okay. Amar Papa, Hai Goy, Tedare Zika, Vekazil Yisrael Ahore. The Papa has another law. If I have a non-Jew carrying a wineskin, so a closed up wineskin, holding wine, and he's carrying it over his shoulder. And a Jew is walking behind him to make sure, he's the mashkiach, make sure that the non-Jew and no one else will touch any of the wine. Is that okay? Depends. Malia Shareh de la Mekarkesh. If the wineskin is full, is permitted because it has nowhere to move, the wine inside has nowhere to shake. It's just not because it's full. So then it's okay. So because even if the non-Jew moves it around, shakes his body, shakes the wineskin, it's not going to move around because there's no room inside. Chasira asir dilma mekarkesh. But if the wineskin is not full, then it's prohibited because maybe the non-Jew will have in mind, oh, I'm going to swish this around for the sake of idolatry, and there's room inside for it to move around. So therefore, it's prohibited. Even if the Jew's watching, he can only watch to see that the non-Jew is not putting his hand in to touch it. But how can he tell if he's, sways this way and that way? Maybe just that's the way he walks. So it'd be hard for him to stop the non-Jew from swishing it around. Kuba malya asir dilma naga chasera shared de la naga. If the non-Jew is not holding a wineskin, but rather a beaker or a cup, if it's all the way full, then it's prohibited because even though the Jew is watching the non-Jew, since it's full, if the non-Jew touches it, it holds the cup near the top, it's very easy for him to then touch the wine a little bit on top, and it won't be noticeable from the Jew watching because it's all the way full. But if the beaker is not full, then it's permitted because then it's clear he's not touching it. You're watching him. In order to touch it, you have to actually put his hand inside, reach down because it's whatever 3/4 full. So then it'll be noticeable if he's putting his hand inside. And so in that case, since the Jew is watching and he would be able to tell if the non-Jew did put his hand inside and he didn't, therefore it's permitted. Rav Asher Amar Zika ben Malia ben Chasera Shareh Mai Tama en Derech Nisuch Bechach. Rav Asher disagrees. He's more lenient regarding the case of a wineskin, and he says doesn't matter whether it's full or the wineskin is not full, it's permitted. Why? Because that's not the way to give a libation by shaking something that's in a wineskin. They don't do that. Even the idolaters don't shake it while it's in the wineskin. If it's in a cup and then they pour it or they swish it around, mix it while it's in the cup, yeah, then that would be a way. But in the wineskin, they don't do that. So therefore, it's permitted even if the wineskin is not full. Ma'sera zaira. The process of making wine is that first you put it in a big vat and they step on it. But then after that, you take all the skin and the pits and the leftovers that are in the upper vat after the initial stepping on, and you put that into a press. A press can look something like this. So you put all those grape parts in here, and then you'll have a piece of wood on top that will press down. And this is one type where it has a screw, and as you turn this, it gets lower and lower and pushes more and more pressure on top of it. And then the remaining juice will come out of the spout over here. Another type is you put a big beam over the top, and then you use it kind of as a lever, and you put weights on the beam, or you push down on the beam, and then that pushes a board that pushes down on the grapes, and the juice will come out. So, what is the status of a wine press if a non-Jew is helping to push down on the wine press? Rapapi says it's permitted. Rav Asher and some say Rav Shimi bar Asher say it's prohibited. Now, if it's his actual force, in other words, if the non-Jew is stepping on it, is pushing down on it with his physical force directly down on top of the board or on top of that beam, then everybody would agree that it's prohibited because he is his force is coming into contact, is pushing that wine down. Ki pelige bekoach kocho, but the machloket here between Rav Papi and Rav Asher is regarding something that's a secondary strength. And the good example of that would be if the non-Jew was not pushing any force down, but rather turning the screw. So actually he's making a round motion sideways, and as a result of that is pushing the platform down further. So that is an indirect action, and so that is the machloket where Rav Papi says it's okay, and Rav Asher says it's not. That's one version. In another version of understanding this machloket, if it's indirect, if he's just turning the screw, everybody would agree that the wine is permitted because it's totally indirect. Ki pelige bekocho, the machloket is when he's pushing down on it directly or standing on top of it, that is where there is a machloket. There was a story when a non-Jew used his indirect, it was just turning the screw, and the Rav Yaakov from Nahal Pekod said that it is prohibited. So even in koach kocho, so that means he was going like Rav Asher, and he interpreted it, this machloket, to be even regarding koach kocho as prohibited. Hahu chavita, a barrel, de'i paka'a leorka. It was splitting lengthwise, meaning from top to bottom. If you imagine, let's say this is the barrel, then the boards were coming apart vertically. This board here was moving away from this board here, and the non-Jew came and hugged it, put his arms all the way around it in order to keep it together so that it would not split. So a non-Jew jumped up and hugged it. And Rafram bar Papa and some say Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yoshua, said it's permitted to sell that wine. You can't drink it because the non-Jew, by hugging it, he's squeezing those boards together, and thereby moves, even though he's not touching because it's through the boards, but he's moving the wine by pushing it inwards, so therefore it becomes prohibited to drink. But his intention is not to save it. And he's not touching it directly. So although it's prohibited to drink, it's permitted to sell. But that's only if it was splitting apart lengthwise. But let's say widthwise, let's say the top half was splitting from the bottom half, and he presses down on top so that it won't come apart. In that case, it's permitted even to drink. Why? Because the non-Jew is acting more like a brick that's weighing the barrel down so that the top doesn't come off. So he's not actually moving it. He's just sitting there to make sure that it doesn't move. And so he's just acting like a brick. And therefore, it's totally permitted. One time there was a non-Jew who was standing in a vat. It was like an empty vat like this one, and he's standing inside the vat. And the problem is that there may be some wine still on the bottom. It's a mostly empty vat, but it's still wet from some wine on the bottom, and he's standing in it and thereby touching it. So what's the status of that residue and of the vat itself? Because that residue, that little bit of liquid that might be on the bottom, can be absorbed into the bottom, and the sides of the vat, and maybe then that absorption would make it prohibited. Amar Rav Shei katofech lehatpiach behadacha or be'enigur be'ilah behadacha be'alma sageleh. So Rav Shei says it depends how wet it is. If it's so wet that it will cause something to be moist that itself will cause something else to be moist. In other words, if it's so wet on the bottom, let's say you put your hand there, your hand will become wet, and your hand will become wet enough that when you put your hand on something else, that other on the table, that table also becomes wet. So that's very wet. And therefore, the non-Jew standing in it made all that prohibited, and what is absorbed in the wine press also is prohibited, and therefore the wine vat requires not only rinsing but also cleansing. You have to clean it really well with an abrasive substance to get all of that out. However, if it's only a little bit moist, such that you touch it, it's wet, but it won't make your hand wet so wet that if you touch a table, that the table also will become wet. So if it's only a little bit moist, then you just have to wash it, and then it's okay. נוכרי שנמצא עומד בסד הבור של יין, אם יש לו מלווה עליו אסור, אין לו מלווה עליו מותר. If someone comes and he sees a non-Jew standing next to his collection vat of wine, and so we don't know if he touched it or not. So can we assume that he did or assume that he didn't? Well, it depends. If the Jewish owner of the vat, owes the non-Jew some money, then we can assume that the non-Jew is like, hey, this guy owes me money. Hey, you know what? He'll pay me from this wine. So he goes and touches the wine to see if it's good. And so he feels ownership over the wine already. So then we assume that he did touch it and it's prohibited. But if they have no business dealings and the Jewish owner of the vat does not owe the non-Jew anything, then the wine in the wine vat is permitted because there's no reason for the non-Jew to have touched it. It doesn't belong to him, so we assume that he's not going to just go and touch other people's property. נפל לבור ועלה, מדדו בקנה, התיז את הסירה בקנה, או שהמטפיח על פי חבית מרותחת, בכל אלו היה מעשה ואמרו יימכר. If a non-Jew fell into the vat and he came out. In all of these cases, we're going to rule that one cannot drink the wine, but one is permitted to sell the wine. You can get benefit from it. You can't drink the wine because the non-Jew touched it, but you can still sell it because it was inadvertent. He certainly had no intention. He just fell into the vat. So certainly he had no intention to make it idolatrous wine, but still he touched it. So therefore it has that middle status. That's the first case. Second case, if he measures it with a pole. So here he did touch it and he had intention to touch it. So that's why it's prohibited to drink from it. However, he didn't touch it directly, and also his intention was to measure it, not to make it idolatrous wine. So for those reasons, one is permitted to sell it. If he sent away a hornet with a stick, he used a stick and was waving near the wine and touched the wine to get the hornet away, same thing. He touched it only indirectly, and his intention was to move away the hornet, not to make it yain nesech. Or if he was removing the foam on top of a fermenting barrel, and so he touched the foam, he moved away the foam, and so his intention was to move away the foam, not to make it yain nesech. So in all these cases, there were actual cases like this, and the rabbi said, you can sell it, you can benefit from it, but you cannot drink it. Rabbi Shimon matir. Rabbi Shimon permitted in all these cases for all those reasons that Tanakama said that one can sell it. Rabbi Shimon says, well, no, if you could sell it, then you can also drink it. It's either all or nothing for Rabbi Shimon. Natal et achavit uzraka b'chamato labor zeh yamase v'hichshiru. If a non-Jew took a barrel and threw it because he was in anger, he wanted to throw something, so he threw a barrel into a vat. So he did move the wine. He picked it up and he threw it. Nevertheless, a case happened like this, and the rabbi said it's okay, because here he certainly had no intention to make it yayin nesech. He was angry, and he threw the wine for that, therefore it's permitted even to drink. Amar Shemuel, Shemuel has a leniency regarding the first case, when the non-Jew is standing there and we said, oh, if he has a loan out, then it's prohibited, because then the non-Jew is like, oh, this guy owes me money, so I'm going to collect from this wine, and he will go and touch it, and therefore it's prohibited. Shemuel says that is only if he, not only that he has a loan, but he has a lien. The lien for the loan is he has a lien on the wine in order to pay back the loan. So he comes to collect it, and he knows that if this Jew doesn't pay him money, then he can collect the wine. So he has ownership, or feels ownership, and he in fact has a form of ownership over the wine. In that case, yes, he'll go and touch it. But if it's just a loan, a general loan, without a lien, or a lien on something else, then he's not going, even though, you owe money, but he's not going to feel ownership over the wine to go and touch it, because he doesn't have a specific lien on the wine, and so even if he's owed money, he's not going to touch the wine. Amar Rav Asher, matnitina midaika ditnan. Rav Asher says Shemuel's opinion is supported by a Mishnah on the following daf. Let's say a non-Jew has a wine press and has grapes, and he wants to manufacture wine that's kosher, so he can sell it to Jews. So what he does is the non-Jew, the nochri, will hire a Jew to process the wine so that he won't touch it. The Jew will touch it. And then after it's finished, it's stored in the property of the non-Jew until the Jew will go and find a buyer and then be like the middleman, get money from the buyer, give the money to the non-Jew, and then they will go and take that barrel from the non-Jew's yard. Okay, so we did all this. So the wine is good, it's kosher, the Jew made it, manufactured it, but it's in the property of the non-Jew. Should we be afraid that the non-Jew in the meantime may go and touch it? Well, it depends. If the non-Jew writes a note to the Jewish guy who manufactured it and is the middleman, and the note says, I received money from you, even if he didn't actually receive money from him, but he writes, I receive money from you, then it's permitted for a Jew to drink that, because since the Jew has the note, so the Jew can come at any time and take the barrel. So it's as if it's already in the Jew's possession. But if not, let's say that doesn't have a note, and so now if the Jew comes to take the barrel, the non-Jew will say, hey, you never paid for it, you can't take it, and so the non-Jew will feel more ownership over the barrel and may touch it. But if he has a note that says it was paid, the Jew can come in any time and take it. And now this is true even if he didn't actually pay. So if he didn't actually pay, that would be like a general loan. It's not a loan with a document, but it's a general loan. He owes him the money. So, legally he does have to pay him, but there's no proof here. So this is more like a general loan. The Jew can come and take the barrel anytime, although he would have to pay the money at some point. So if he has a document and he can come take the barrel at any time because he has the document and will pay later, pay sometime, then it's permitted. We assume that the non-Jew is not going to touch it because he knows someone can come and take it. But if the situation is such that when the Jew would try to come and take it, the non-Jew could stop him and say, no, you can't take it until you pay me, then there was a case just like this in Bet She'an, and the rabbi said it's prohibited because the non-Jew can stop the Jew from taking it. Therefore, it's in the non-Jew's possession, and he says, oh, look, do you have a note? No, I don't have a note. Well, you can't take it. Well, then the non-Jew will feel free to go and touch it. So what can we learn from this Mishnah? Tama de en manicho, ha-manicho shareh. The only reason why it was prohibited in this last case is because the non-Jew can stop the Jew from taking it. But if he has to allow it because he gave him the note, the non-Jew has to say, okay, yes, you can take it, I can't stop you, then it's permitted for the Jew to assume that the non-Jew did not touch it. Shema mina milveh aloto yayin ba'inan shema mina. We can learn from here that only if the non-Jewish, in the case of the Mishnah, the non-Jewish lender has a lien on this particular wine, and he can he can take it at any time, he can keep it for himself. That's like the case over here of keeping it for himself, because you didn't pay yet. So just like the non-Jew Over here, if the non-Jew can stop the Jew from taking it, that's the same as a case where the non-Jew can take the wine of the Jew because he has a lien on it. So in those cases, when the non-Jew can either keep it in this case or take it, in the case where of our Mishnah, then we assume that the non-Jew will touch it, and therefore it's prohibited. However, if, just like in the case over here, in the next Mishnah, when the non-Jew cannot withhold it from the Jew, then that's it, or it's already like it is in the Jew's property. And so too, that would be the same as the case in our Mishnah, where he has a loan out, just like in this case, is a general loan, right? It's generally on money. But since he wrote a note, so he can't stop the Jew from taking the barrel, even though there is a general loan that the Jew has to pay him, but you don't apply that general loan to the specific barrel. So that is an equivalent case to our Mishnah, where this non-Jew shows up, he has a general loan, but not a lien on that wine. So then we assume that even though he has a general loan, he's not going to go and touch this specific wine because there's no lien on it. He can't just go and take that wine without permission. So that's a good proof for Shemuel. נפל הבור ועלה, אמר הפapa, לא שנו אלא שעלה מת, אבל עלה חי אסור. When the Mishnah taught that if a non-Jew falls into a vat, then it's prohibited to drink, but it's permitted to sell. So that Rapapa says that's only if he comes out dead. If he falls in there and he drowns in there, then it's permitted to sell. But if he comes out alive, then it's prohibited. Why? Because that will be the same as a festival day. If he fell into a vat and almost drowned, but made it out alive, he's certainly going to thank his God, like on a holiday. And so since he's going to thank his God, he's going to have in mind that, this should be Yayin Nesech. While he's in there, he realizes, I almost drowned. Oh, look, I'm safe. They're pulling me out. So while he's getting pulled out, he feels gratitude, and he'll move around the wine and have in mind that will be a thanksgiving to his God, and Yayin Nesech, so that makes the wine prohibited. In all these cases where it's either he didn't have intention or it's indirect, so Rabbi Shimon said in all these cases it's permitted to sell and permitted to drink. Amar Avoda bar Hava yanuchu lo Rabbi Shimon berachot al rosho kishu matir afilu b'shtiya kishu oser afilu behanaa. Avoda bar Hava says there should be blessings on the head of Rabbi Shimon, because he makes everything clear cut. When he says it's permitted to sell and to drink. And when he says prohibited, it's prohibited to even to get benefit from, and certainly to drink. So it makes everything clear cut, black and white, and makes it very easy for everyone. Amar Rav Chia beredra de Abba, Bar Nachmani Amar Rav Chista Amar Rav, V'amrila Amar Rav Chista Amar Ze'iri, Halacha Rabbi Shimon. So either in the name of Rav or in the name of Ze'iri says halacha is like Rabbi Shimon, and in those cases it's permitted to drink the wine. Or another set of students said in the name of Ze'iri, halacha is like Rabbi Shimon. But the bottom line is that the halacha does not follow Rabbi Shimon. The end of the Mishnah teaches Natal Chavit Uzraka Bachamato Labor Zaya Maaseh Vehichshiru. If a non-Jew takes a barrel and throws it in anger into the pit of wine, so although by his force of throwing it agitates the wine in the vat, nevertheless, there was a case like this, and the rabbi said it's permitted. First of all, his intention is he's throwing something out of anger, and so it's out of anger, not having in mind yayin nesech. And furthermore, although he is moving the wine, it's indirect. He's not touching the wine. He's not even touching a stick touching the wine. Rather, he threw something in the air that, after a couple of seconds, fell into the vat and moved the wine in the vat. So that's very indirect. Amar Rav Asher, Kol shebezav tameh begoy oseh yeh nesech. Kol shebezav taor begoy eno oseh yeh nesech. Rav Asher says a rule: anything that is any way that a zav would cause tum'ah. Now a zav can cause tum'ah not only by touching something, but also by moving it, even if not by touching, or by holding a stick, or lying down on something, pushing down on something. So there's all kinds of ways that a zav can make things tameh, and so those ways also would apply to a non-Jew also, whether he moves it, touches it directly, or even other indirect things like with a stick and so on. But if there's some way in which a zav, by doing something like a zav, if a zav throws a ball at something, it doesn't that thing, whatever it reaches, will not become tameh. So too, a non-Jew who throws something into wine will not make the wine yain nesech. Now this rule has some exceptions, but he's giving a general rule. Rav Huna challenges Rav Ashi from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says if someone a non-Jew took a barrel and threw it into a pit of wine, there was a case like this, and the rabbi said it's permitted because he was angry, and so he hadn't have intention to make yain nesech. So only if he's angry. What if he was not angry and he tossed it in nicely? So then the law would be different and it would be prohibited. So look, here we have a case where it's against Rav Ashi, where although a zav, if he threw something, tossed it in, whatever mood he was in, doesn't matter. If a zav threw something at something else, that target would remain tahor. So too, in the case of the non-Jew, if he tossed it in nicely, then it should be permitted. And yet, that's not the Mishnah implies that it would be prohibited. And the answer is Hatam de Ka'azil mineh umineh. Rav Ashi says, no, if he's not throwing it in anger, then we're assuming the case is not that he throws it out of his hand and it flies into the air and only a couple of seconds later lands in, but rather that he pushed it a little by little. He's rolling it, he pushes a little, it rolls a bit, he pushes it again, it rolls a little, and so then it's prohibited because we are afraid that at that last push, he's right next to the cistern, the vat of wine, and in that last push, he's pushing it and directly pushing the barrel into the wine, and it will be his direct force that is agitating the wine, and thereby that's the reason why it would be prohibited. But yes, you're right. In fact, if he threw it from far, whether in anger or not, the point of anger is that he threw it far. That's the point. It doesn't really matter if he's angry or not. If he threw it far, then it would be permitted because that's totally indirect. But if he pushes it from very close, just rolls it in, then that would be more of a direct force and prohibited. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.